Hi, everybody. This is Beth. I'm with Tiara International. I'm one of the partners, and joining me today are two of my other partners, Dr. Alison Miller and Franciska from the Netherlands, who's joining us. We are having a conversation, and we decided to hit the record button because we really think it's timely, and we think it's a conversation that we want other people to be hearing and to be part of. And this was generated from our partner meetings. Every week we have a partner meeting and we talk about current events, we talk about our lives. And what was coming out was, we were all profoundly impacted by the tragedy that occurred last week and this violence that still is happening. And it's happening widespread here in the US, but we also know it's happening around the world. And Alison, I think you said it lovely when you said, like, the world is, and our country in particular is really, this is a cry for leadership right now. There's a call for us to all, step in, not only to our own leadership, but, if everyone could do that, and what would that look like? And that really spawned a pretty cool conversation for all of us. So just kind of open it up for the three of us in terms of, what does that call to leadership look like? And why are we so interested in tying this to leadership?
Mm-hmm. What I like, Beth, about the call for leadership is one point of view that we like to share is that all of us, each and everyone, is already a leader. It's not necessarily a position in an organization or in another context. I mean, you are a leader. We all are leaders. And given the situation of the shootings and the call for leadership, it does call upon all of us, indeed, to see, okay, hey, what is it inside of me and my circle of influence, perhaps? What can I think of? What can I do? Who can I be? And maybe I cannot, I'm living in the Netherlands, so I cannot immediately impact what's happening in the US politically or shooting wise, but I can still think about, okay, what does that mean for me? How can I think? How can I act? And maybe nothing I can do.
Right. I think that one of the beautiful things about our model that we use at Tiara of leadership is that it does call people to really get in touch with what actually matters to them, what they stand for, what their life's about, what you're leading for what end. So Beth just put the leadership model up, but for what purpose? So if everyone is a leader in their life, well, to what end? And I think that when we have a tragedy like what happened in Florida and what's happened, in Las Vegas and what happened at that church and so many other that, it's hard to even imagine how many are happening. It's very easy to go to fear and to go to get into survival mode and lose contact with our own ability to make choices and to be connected to what gives us a sense of inspiration and meaning and purpose in our life, and how do we want to choose to live our life. So I'll just give an example. I think one of the things that we can see is that there are people living in our world who don't feel like they belong. They don't feel connected. They feel wronged by society. And in a very small way, as you move through your day, having a sense of that one of the things that you want to create for yourself and others is a sense of belonging and connection. And that for the people around you, that you're able to be influential in a way where we're awoken to the need that our fellow human beings have to feel like they are connected. I have children, and it's one of the things I've talked with them about hundreds of times, about being the kind of kid who stands up for other kids who are being teased or bullied, being a loving person, in elementary school and middle school, and now I have a high school student. And I'm really proud of my 17-year-old who is someone who always stands up for other kids who might be being mistreated. That we have a cultural shift where there's an awareness of we don't want to leave people behind.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, when you start to wake up and realize, wait a minute, I'm a leader too. How do I want to lead in a way that contributes to the kind of society that I want to live in? And we need people right now, like these teenagers in Florida, to rise up and say, this is the kind of world I want to live in. We're off track from that. How do we get back on track?
Yeah, you're really actually describing something, Alison, about, with our model, the three main dimensions in our model, awareness, how do we actually grow in our own awareness?
Yes.
You mentioned fear. Franciska, you mentioned, we're all leaders. Like these are awarenesses. And even the reaction people are having around the world to these shootings, that is part of the awareness dimension. It can be fear, it can be sadness, it can be, righteous indignation, righteous indignation. All of these things are part of how we are reacting in this level of awareness. So the first dimension in the model is actually around that. And if you look at this model, it talks about, acceptance and clarity coming together in this level of awareness. Now, that leads a whole nother, accept. How on earth can we accept this? How can we accept this level of violence and this just horrific tragedy that keeps happening over and over again because of so many things that are just not working together in our society? Right. They just keep pulling apart. And it's one of the reasons why I was so inspired by our conversation earlier, because, having a place to talk about all of these things and to actually process it actually allows people to hear each other instead of trying to convince and persuade each other. And it does start with this awareness dimension. It does move to another area about accomplishment and producing results. That's the second main dimension. And then this third main dimension is around influence and power. Like, how do we as individuals, as these teenagers, these 14 and 15-year-olds, Alison, you said they're acting more like adults than adults are right now. Like, how do we actually influence a solution that is bigger than anything we could do on our own? And right. Those key things, if we could have conversations in those dimensions and right. really come from a listening of, okay, I don't agree with you, but how on earth do you see what you see? Let me get there.
Right. I think, and the truth is that if you really look underneath it all, whether you're wanting to ban guns or limit, the accessibility of semi-automatic weapons or automatic weapons, whatever it, or you believe people should have access to anything, whatever it is that you believe about guns, for example, if we drill down and look underneath it, I think that we can find that there's things that we have in common. So, for example, we all want to be safe.
Right.
Right? We all want to be able to, protect ourselves and our families and feel safe. What are the things that we actually have in common? And it's one of the things I like in the model. If you look in the center there, where the crown is, what is it that inspires us? What is it that we want? What gives us a sense of purpose? What do we want in our lives? And I think that part of what we really are needing is leadership that helps us find common ground now. So we're not all off in our own camps, stuck in our reactivity about what's happened. Because what has happened, once again, has shocked our sensibilities of how could this happen? And it's very easy just to be in kind of survival mode about it. But I think that the piece that you said, Beth, about acceptance, I know that can be really hard to understand. We're not saying that we should tolerate this, but rather acceptance is about actually acknowledging this happened and this is happening.
It happened, yes, yeah. Alison. And if I may add, in addition to the realization that we are all leaders, that is something. But then, who are you being then as a leader? Are you coming from this powerless place, and are you realizing that, I'm not influential, I don't have a grip on my life, I am in a sort of I feel victimized in a way? Or do you really feel powerful? If you really feel powerful, it's much easier to take up your leadership role, your leadership identity, your leadership actions, and so on. So this awareness and what is the dimensions also of acceptance also refer to awareness and acceptance that we are all humans, that we are all human beings. I mean, and we are not always in this powerful place. Mm-hmm. We are taking turns during a day. Me too. I mean, you too. In different places, and it's about accepting and acknowledging that. Also taking that into the equation, taking that into the dialogues that we might have, would be so freeing. And it sounds maybe ideal and naive, but yeah, well, what is there to be naive about that we are human beings trying our best and trying to be influential, trying to produce results, including a world where we can be safe and live the lives as we intend to live from the inside out.
Yeah, you know, Franciska, it's really, you know, we're taking something that is so real and so just gut-wrenching in terms of, you know, somebody taking the lives of 17 people and 14 children. I mean, these are children, right? And, you know, when we were talking about it in the space of something that horrific, in the space of a leadership model, may actually sound crazy, maybe even a little self-serving, you know, like, why are we doing that? But I think the thing that's occurring to all of us is that these are exactly the types of conversations to have with an open heart, with a sad heart, with a heavy heart, whatever, you know, we're feeling, in order to actually move through the conversation in a way that can produce results. And I think that's the thing that we're recognizing is that.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's also interesting to realize that even shooters have a level of awareness about themselves. They have a level of what they are wanting and what's the kind of of results they're producing or not producing in their lives. They have an awareness of how they are, well, probably not influential. So all of this is sort of internalized in their being, which makes it perhaps possible to understand and to explain how things like this happen through some certain people, individuals, but it doesn't necessarily lead us to the need to accept what happens. So I like what we do through our lens also is provide the opportunity to come together and say, hey, what is it that we truly want and what is it that we do not want, that we do not accept, that we would like to change, and see if and how to offer help.
Yeah.
Also to a shooter.
Yeah. I think, you know, as we're talking about this, we can see ourselves individually in this model, individually in each stage in the model, in each dimension. But what I think we're also feeling is collectively we can be engaged with the model. Collectively we can be in a bigger conversation. You know, as my heart is breaking for all these families and these students who are affected by this, my heart also breaks for that young man and how absolutely alone he is. And there's nothing about what he did that I condone or that I can, you know, tolerate in my life either. But at the same time, you know, there has to be a space that we can, that we try to understand so that we can move through and try to change the future and try to change things. And yes, it's legislation and other things, but you know, it's both it's the combination is, I guess, what we're talking about is understanding leadership at an individual level and understanding it in a collective way so that we can actually have the influence we want as a society.
Yeah. And I think the fact that we have individuals in our society that are carrying out these kinds of acts, it can be easy to see them as, oh, that person is completely separate from me. They're these separate, evil, deranged people, but actually they're human beings and they weren't born like that. And I think that we can't just focus it on an individual level, but I think we have to look at it as a collective, which is as a collective, how is it that we are ending up with some of our sort of brothers and sisters in so much trouble, so disconnected from themselves, capable of uh, committing such terrible atrocity upon one another? You know, how, what happened? And if you can actually be honest and look at your own self as a leader, right, in your own life, is to realize that you actually don't always use your power for good.
Yeah.
You know, all of us, I'm not saying that it's anywhere on the scale of that, but haven't we all spoken in anger? Haven't we been manipulative or lied or maybe cheated or just been a jerk, been unkind, been, and again, I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm saying is that we're all so vulnerable as human beings to feeling rejected, wounded, alone, desperate, needy. And um, I just think the fact that we've got certain individuals in our society, obviously having access to the weapons is part of the problem, that they have access to something where they're capable of inflicting this much damage in a short amount of time. And I think that's a very complicated issue for us in the United States to sort out. But what has happened to an individual, and I actually am with you, Beth, is that if we don't have compassion for the incredible soul-searing pain that must be underneath how someone turns against their own nature as a human being, right? And can turn against themselves and others, I don't think we'll ever solve this problem. You know, I don't think it's just a matter of taking guns away, but what's happening that people are harming themselves and others in such catastrophic ways, you know? And I don't know that I know the answer to that question, but I really do. My heart aches for what the experience must have been like for this individual to have committed this kind of crime. And yes, does he need to be held accountable for it? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
But what must have happened in his experience? What must he have lived through? And I think back, you know, how old was he? He's very young.
Like
You know,
yeah.
19.
if we could go back 10, 15 years in time, when did he lose his innocence?
Mhm.
How could this have come to be?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and one aspect indeed, well, there are multiple aspects, but a special aspect is what happened to him, what have been the circumstances. The other aspect I'm thinking of is what has that made him believe about himself and about the circumstances.
Yeah.
And there is room at that level of what one believes to be true, that can be molded, changed, taken different point of views. And that's where it's important to stay in community, to have a collective conversation,
Right.
to be together and be able to say to in such a situation that, hey, it's not strange that you have that kind of thoughts or beliefs, or that's or what's happening is because it's also human how our beliefs sort of form themselves and how they often have a life of their own. Our mental capabilities are incredibly innovative and creative often. But,
Yeah, we can't stop our thoughts if we wanted to. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
what's the latest statistic? Over 40,000 thoughts a day. You know, not all
Yeah.
conscious. You know, not all of them are helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
I think the other thing that's really interesting is, um, you know, when I was talking about this a couple days ago, someone said to me, "Why don't you run for political office?" And I joked and I said, "Yeah, no, that's really not my calling. What I would do, and what I'm asking of our elected officials, is that they stop trying to convince everyone and instead listen and engage in a conversation. and figure out how do we get more voices together that actually, to your point, Alison, do get to the heart of the matter. Because if we keep peeling the onion back, we'll have a very similar want early on or down deep. There's some things that we are absolutely able to align on. It's how do we actually stop this convincing, polarizing behavior? And it's a behavior. And to your point, Franciska, I think it's a mindset too. Like, I have to be right. I have to show you I'm right. Instead of, how about being curious? How about saying, how on earth did this happen? How could this actually occur? What are we missing, in our society?
How are we co-conspirators in it, right? What is going on in our world that this is happening over and over and over again? And really to step back and look at, there's an incredible amount of violence that's happening all over our planet still. Here we're in 2018. And I know that we've had an incredible amount of violence throughout human history. And you have to hope that we're spiraling up and evolving. I mean, I do read statistics that say the world is actually safer and more peaceful right now than any time in human history. I think it's hard to feel that way because of the information that we have access to. I mean, this morning I was watching images of what was happening in Syria right after they were showing the funerals that were happening in Florida. And I just had to walk out of the room and go cry, because it's just, I turned to my husband and I said, I'm watching what's happening in Syria. To what end?
Yeah.
To what end? But I believe that there are many of us, like those of us who are here together today, and many people, as I said, our brothers and sisters out there, who know in our hearts that peace is possible. There's a different way of living where we don't leave anyone behind, right? Where, but one of the key distinctions in our model is about community, and that we actually really do value community, and we're looking around to see how do we live in community together, even though we have different backgrounds, different beliefs, different ways we want things done, but how do we live with a greater sense of harmony? And I think that's part of our charge as a leader, is to move beyond our opinions and our righteousness and our reactivity and our desire to survive, which is part of what's, as you were saying, Franciska, is kind of wired into us. But to what end am I living? For what purpose? What's the legacy I want to leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're actually talking about what's at the cornerstone in our leadership model too, Alison, which is, what is my source of inspiration? So, whether you call it a legacy, whether you call it a leadership mantra, whether you call it who you are and how you show up in the world,
right?
It's that source. It's what sources you, and that's the thing. Again, we're not just asking for individuals to step up. It's a both and for us. We're saying, look, individually, we all have to do things differently and step up and change some patterns for the way we're leading our lives. That feels like a given. But what we're also saying is, we want people to be a collective, the community we want to actually be stepping up. We want the community to be growing, and the community to be stepping up in an aligned way. And that is what the call, if I had a call for action for the three of us today, and, for the meeting that we had before, it was really about, what is it that we hope? And I think we hope that not only will the individual step up, because that's important. Those teenagers that are stepping up in Florida are so courageous and are so inspiring to just witness. We also need the communities to step up, and the communities not to continue to engage in that polarization, but to actually seek alignment. They don't have to agree. That's a key distinction for us. You don't have to agree with somebody in order to align on a mutual outcome.
Right. How do we find a way forward, given that people have such different opinions about gun rights in the United States, as an example, but towards a common purpose of churches and schools and community centers and concerts, and where people can go and enjoy and learn and grow and, grow in spirit and, in mind, in every way, and be safe? How do we do that in a way where people feel safe and honor the intentions of, and desires of different parties. That's not an easy thing to solve, but what's going on now, where people are immediately writing off somebody else and all this anger and reactivity, it's not getting us anywhere. And I think it's up to each of us as an individual to say, you know what, I'm not going to participate in that anymore. I'm actually going to do what you were saying, Beth, which is I'm going to be a leader about it. And part of being a leader is being able to be curious and to listen and check your own reactivity and see if you can actually hear where someone else is coming from.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of Einstein. I don't know exactly how it was worded, but it's about it's not possible to resolve problems at the level of thinking or minds within the same paradigm as the problem has occurred. So taking this situation about gun shooting as the problem, it cannot be solved only looking at, okay, how can we change the structures, the procedures, how can we change our individual behavior? It really needs to take into account a level much deeper, like who are we being inside of what we are doing. When we talk, when we have discussions or dialogues about what we want, what we do not want for our communities, for the world, whatever, it is important to take into that conversation, to include in there, are we coming ourselves when we are showing up in the conversation? Are we coming from a fearful place? Are we afraid that there will never be a solution? Are we coming from a clever state, like, oh, I don't know yet how, but we are going to solve this? Or are we going from a state of deep truth? And that is exactly what I think is missing, and the time is ripe, and it's only beginning that more and more people are showing up from that level to participate in that in those dialogues. And I'm so grateful that through the lens of Tiara, that is exactly where we are contributing. Exactly at that level, who are we being when we are showing up wherever?
Well said.
To you guys, you know, there's these two guidelines, like behavioral guidelines, just we're jumping off. You know, start listening. Allow yourself to hear people's pain. You know, hear the fear. It's okay. Like, let's not be afraid of fear. Fear is fear. I mean, it's just another emotion. You know, come from curiosity. Be curious. Stop trying to persuade. Stop the convincing. You know, let's actually start listening.
Right.
You know, and come from this place, Franciska, that you're describing, this behavior, this the being of a true leader. Come from a place of real acceptance and love and understanding that these situations can change, and we can be the source for it.
Yeah. Exciting. Yeah. Challenging and exciting.
Yeah, and thanks guys for jumping on the video. I think the conversation that we started, you know, with our, you know, team was really powerful. And I hope anybody who's listening to this video really hears the compassion and the strength and the love that we have, and the way that we really want the world to operate is a powerful place that comes from personal responsibility for who we are and who we are together. And that means us taking responsibility for what happened in Florida, you know? So thanks everybody. It was really nice chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.